Table Talk is not your typical D&D TTRPG podcast. We are not here to run you through our whole campaign.
We're here to talk about everything else in the space of tabletop roleplay.
I'm your host, Alejandra Wilhelm.
And I'm also your host, Mariah Gresham.
And we're your tabletop roleplay girlies. Alrighty, and we are live back at it with another episode of Table Talk. Thank you so much for coming back to us. So we have another amazing guest episode, and I'm very, very excited about this one. We have two lovely, lovely guests. Please give me a little intro about you yourselves and what you do and where people can find you.
Hello, adventurers. I'm Natalie Fuina. I am the editor-producer over at the Storyteller Squad. I'm also the game runner or keeper, as we like to say in our system. And you can find me at Natalie Fuina, Fuinha, and we are at Story Squad Cast. And I'm here with my lovely cast member, Mel. Mel, take it away.
Hi, friends. I'm Mel Lee. You can find me on most socials as Mellowedge. I am the social media manager and cast member of the Storyteller Squad. I play Ariel Valentine. And Natalie, can I say this one now? Can I say the second one now?
This
Am I
is
allowed
probably
to do that?
yeah. Look, well, when's it coming out?
Yeah, everyone's safe to come out on that.
Oh, honey, I did that years ago.
Yeah.
And a secret character who may or may not have been revealed that they are back in the story. And that's enough of a clue you're going to get out of us here.
Oh, spicy. Okay. Yeah, we had the lovely, lovely privilege of meeting y'all at PAX Unplugged, and Mel and I saw each other from across the room, and like the instant recognition in our eyes, because you recognized me from my days like as Rada, and we've been equals forever.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, holy shit. It was so good.
I think I specifically said, I was like, your face. I know your face.
Yeah. There's just like Rada across like the Marriott bar. It was so good. Also, Natalie, you have a whole radio voice, and it is
fantastic.
Phenomenal. Oh yeah,
phenomenal.
I can turn it on when I need to.
Well, listen. I've already been flustered by another guest.
You're and I'm fine for it to happen again.
Listen, the bi panic is real, and it's fine.
Listen, if you want some other voices, I got them.
But me and Mel are both
Listen, I have to listen to this woman like flirt with our friends on the regular, so I'm not used to it still, and
listen,
it's
that's
been
all
ongoing.
fine and okay, because I do the same exact thing with my girls.
Absolutely,
and I do have the dom energy, and I do flip that shit on, and they're shook.
Yeah, Ollie platonically doms me in life, and not so character.
It's a good superpower to have.
It honestly, it's very efficient to have like in a space.
Yeah, especially when y'all are we're rocking through that dating sim like nobody's business.
Yeah.
I recently was told by one of our cast members, Natalie, I know you're not, but if you ever tried being a dom, you'd be really good at it. And I had to sit with that fact and go, yeah, I would be.
Yeah, who said that to you? Who said that to you? I was not there for this conversation.
I'm not going to out the person in our cast who told me that, but
okay, fine.
I mean,
I'll find out later.
But what is a GM if you are not just platonically doming your friends at the table on time to time?
Dungeon master, maybe a little bit sexual.
Yeah. The crossover is practically a circle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There's like a sliver of difference.
just barely, and you do have to enhance that shit to find the 1 pixel of difference, but it's there.
Oh my god.
That's what safety tools are for.
Yeah, that is what safety tools are for.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you guys are on Storyteller Squad. We got to meet some of the rest of your cast as well. And I think I recently literally just like yelled at y'all across the internet because I saw your character art, your updated character art.
So yes. Thank you. Emery did an incredible job. We love Emery so much.
Yeah, the speed at which I followed them is insane.
Like, he deserves all the love.
Broke my phone. Yeah.
We're hoping to break some sound barriers as people hit the follow button.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. And it is well deserved because I literally binged like all of their work on their Instagram, and I was like, this is insane.
Like,
this is so good.
Require more food.
Yeah. I think they have one picture that I saw that was a bar full of vampires of all different like dresses. Like there's like interview. I'm gonna send you that one because obviously BTM stuff. Yeah. But it's like an old style bar with like the little curly Q mustache bartender and all of these different vampires of different like times and aesthetics. Yeah. And then, but underneath the bar was all the people that were being sapped of their blood, and it's on tap, and all the tap has like the blood type. Phenomenal.
Crazy how that turns
yes, I know what you're
up
talking
in
about.
Elysium and Our Fall of London game. Crazy
Yeah.
how that
Crazy how that's just going to become a thing in our VTM game.
Yeah.
Incredible.
But we wanted to talk a little bit about Monster of the Week, which I've never played.
Oh, Natalie,
yeah.
do you want to explain Monster of the
Damn
Week,
it.
or do you want me to explain Monster of the Week?
Yeah, okay. So both of you have never played before?
No.
Okay. Monster of the Week is a powered by the Apocalypse system, meaning it takes a lot of its like core rules and mechanics from Apocalypse World by McGay and Vincent Baker. Did I get that right, Mel?
Yeah, you got it.
Cool. I met them. I should remember their names, but there's so many names to remember in this space. But yeah, so Monster of the Week, however, was written and produced by Michael Sands and Evil Hat Productions. And it's basically a game that tries to let you run games such that they feel very much like 90s serial, episodes of shows like Buffy or Supernatural or even like the X-Files, that kind of thing.
Nice.
Got that like bit of like campy 90s sci-fi / paranormal horror built into it, but it also very much like can expand beyond that into the realms of like Hellboy, Constantine, or go a little softer into like Gravity Falls or
Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Doo, the Netflix show Hilda, if you're familiar with that one.
I love Hilda.
It's
Natalie got me out to
essentially-
Hilda, and I'm obsessed.
Oh, it's so good. But it is
Okay.
essentially a system that is very well equipped to handle fantasy and paranormal and like horror, but set in a modern setting. So real world locations, real world places, or, made up adjacent equivalencies. So our starting town is called Autumn Falls because I'm gay.
Enough said.
But it is yeah, but it is based on a town called Maple Falls, which is an actual place in Washington. So yeah, and then we do all sorts of towns and things like that, and other shows and campaigns do similar stuff. There was what is the one from Monster Hour? Our friends over at Monster Hour. I think their town was called Firmament in Colorado, and I don't know if there's a real Firmament, but that's another one. So yeah, so it breaks from the typical like D20 style systems all the way down to the dice because you're rolling 2d6. There is a success like scaling system as opposed to you succeed, you fail. So in Monster of the Week, it's on a 6 or lower is a miss. They don't even call it a failure technically, because sometimes you're encouraged to fail forward and to allow that to happen as the keeper, such that like if you roll a miss, your character might do what they wanted to, but then a consequence will make it such that like you really shouldn't have done that thing, or you really didn't want to do that thing, you just didn't have complete information, or you'll discover some new information that makes your success at that one thing suddenly insignificant compared to the new like plot bomb you've been hit with.
Yeah. There's also like a level of positivity kind of added to failures like that in terms of that you gain experience by rolling 6 and under. And so you rack those up very easily for like more level ups and more cool things.
Yeah. It's kind of like the Kids on Bike or like the Candela Obscura mechanics now is a little similar because those are also I believe. Well, no, Kids on Bikes is different dice system, but it is like a fail forward situation.
Yes.
And then Candela is like a D6, and so like I think a 6 is a complete success, 5 and 4 are
like
partial.
succeeding at a cost. Like
I believe Candela uses a dice pool, whereas this game, another like
is
quote
only
unquote powered by the Apocalypse,
like
is a combined roll of the two.
Yeah.
VTM is also pools of D8s.
Which is so interesting. I've been trying to explore new systems because I'm currently in the process of doing the world building, like a completely homebrew thing for like when we do an actual play in the future. And I have my heart set on the fact that it will not be a D&D 5th edition system. So I want to explore other options, and I'm thinking like the MCDM one that's coming out for
I just saw that. It looks very
it looks so cool. And that one I do know is also a 2d6 system.
With some additional dice as well, from what I saw. Like I think occasionally D4s and D8s or something like that. Don't quote me. I might be wrong, but I'm intrigued.
Portions of the video, and I immediately I got to the point where I was like, it's very role play heavy, and the combat is a lot more dynamic, and all these other things, and I was like, sold.
All the information I require.
All the information.
Yeah, I mean, depending on what you're like looking to do specifically with your campaign, there's a whole host of systems out there already. Like,
No.
I mean, if you want to do pirates, you might want to do like 7C or something. Or like, if you want to stick with like Powered by the Apocalypse and you want to be like extra flirty with your friends, maybe like Thirsty Sword Lesbians. I don't know.
God, I've been dying for Thirsty Swords lesbians. Like, you would not believe that an opportunity to just throw my hat in a ring.
Yep.
God, so good. And I did want to ask, so like, I've never, well, aside from like, say, VTM, but even then we don't, in our VTM, it's very court politicky. So we're not really in the
There's
real
not
world,
a
at
ton
least
of
not
combat
yet.
right now, partly to give y'all and myself grace.
Yeah.
And so I will just kind of, I mean, it will very quickly get up where you're starting to use your disciplines and you're starting to have like to roll dice pools. Probably like I need to prep what everyone else's dice pools would be, right? And so I've just been setting like arbitrary challenge ratings in my head. But definitely like, yeah, they have like VTM has like a 3 rounds and out system for combat. So effectively, or I mean, you don't have to do it like this. You can do like a full 5e style showdown, but it is to keep it focused on the narrative. You're encouraged to like, you make your dice pools, you do a contest of 3 rolls, and whoever's the victor of those 3, they win the combat.
Yeah, but
which I like a lot because it keeps it quick.
Yeah, and our setting there is like it's technically the past, but like modern, like
it
like
is
real
like,
world.
Yeah, it's 2012 London. Like I'm taking a lot of liberties with the Fall of London like IP, and I'm really just sort of using it. I'm focusing a lot more. The Inquisition is not a factor right now because I want vampire court politics. I don't,
and we got to be gay and romance vampires.
And I want like
you have to allot for time for gay. Yeah.
I want like
always a lot time for gay
for sure. Yeah, and it's like I also like all my players came up with like really interesting arcs and like things that I've hooked into the story now that I want to explore. And then kind of how we're doing with Strixhaven, where we're going through an arc. And then at the end, like after we kind of go through each of y'all's arcs, I think then the Inquisition will become more of a pressing force. And wherever the politics are, as far as like who's in power and who you choose to support and who you choose to not support, that will play into how that affects, you know, the Inquisition's role.
You mentioned how like you would prefer a faster combat. I'm like sort of coming into this idea in my like gaming philosophies, I suppose, since everyone has to have those now with this bloom of new systems. The thing I like about Monster of the Week and other PBTA games is that combat is just a role you make. It's not like a phase you enter. So when you run Monster of the Week and people are fighting, they're fighting, but like in the middle of that fight, you could just stop and have a conversation and start making like the social roles or the investigatory roles and like explore more. And then maybe the fight picks up again, or maybe you've completely ended it just by like starting to talk to someone instead. So it feels very much less like the sound effect when you like hit a wild Pokemon. It's like, synergy, we gotta find out.
Like, I'm locked in
this
now.
This is much more cinematic. It's just a fight is happening, but scenes can continue to happen at the same time. So
I mean, a great example of that was like one of the last recordings that we did, which I can't say anything because spoilers, but also like very specifically, my character ran off to like do something entirely different from the fight, but the fight is still happening. But she's like, nah, I'm not here right now. I'm gonna go do this other thing. So I do enjoy that quite a bit.
It's like that moment in Baldur's Gate where like some of your party has been engaged in combat, but there's one that's left out of combat, and you're like, I'm just gonna run around this shit with this person. Combat's gonna stay paused. Nobody's gonna move while I go do some other shit and just don't get an initiative.
Totally.
Honestly, a mood.
Oh God, yeah. No, dynamic combat is definitely something I'm more looking for, because we, as much as roleplay hoes as we are, we do genuinely enjoy combat, especially when it's run well.
Oh yeah.
And like there are elements of satisfaction in that crunch and knowing that you've like done something really cool mechanically, and like I still want elements of that.
Oh, for sure.
But it is like, I think the thing I liked about like the NCDM video that I was watching was how he mentioned like you always hit. It's just a degree of how much progress you're making and how hard you hit versus how much progress the enemies are making.
Yeah. Because everybody hits every time, like you and the enemies.
Yeah. And so I was like, I like that because it feels like the combat's always going to be rolling. Combat's always going to be like changing. And I think another thing he mentioned was that, you know, it's much more collaborative because the the group gets to decide who goes next.
Yeah, there's not
Each
like a
turn.
set initiative.
Yeah.
And you decide it you decide, the party decides who goes in what order each round, and then the DM does the same with all the enemies. And
Exactly.
stuff.
That is very similar to a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games, including Monster of the
Really?
Week, is that there's no initiative. Like I run Glitter Hearts, which is like magical girls and transforming heroes. And again, it's also Powered by the Apocalypse. No initiative order. It's you go when you feel called to, when it feels applicable to the scenario, when you've got a good idea, you know?
I think
So
you've hit upon like a key difference there though, Mel, just by explaining it further. Like
Yeah.
there's no order at all
Yeah.
in Powered by the Apocalypse. Like
None.
if MCDM, right, if Matt's game is saying that like every round you switch up the order, it's like, okay, but you're still you're
Taking an order.
defining an order, right?
Yeah.
That has to be followed. Whereas in most PvT games that I've played, it's less about like everyone gets a turn, and it's more like you should be wanting a turn. So as long as everyone is like doing a good job of sharing the spotlight, and your keeper is moving that focus around and making sure everyone does get a chance to do something, it flows much more like a
Like a
how to put
dance
it?
almost.
It's like a back and
dance.
forth a little bit more, as opposed to like, okay, we have to like pause the flow or the momentum of this scene that's happening in order to like figure out this like mechanical thing. It's just sort of like, you want to do this? Okay, cool. And then someone says, oh, I have this really good idea. It's like, okay. And either, the keeper says, we'll get to you next, or they say, oh yeah, what is it? Piggyback off the top of that,
Yeah.
So
And in addition
yeah.
to that, what I like about Monster of the Week and a few other Powered by the Apocalypse games by extension, because disclaimer, have not played all of them. I'm working on it. Like
Just gunning your way through them.
like, listen, okay, like here's the thing about Powered by the Apocalypse, then I'll get back to my thought. Like, once you've played one game that is under that umbrella, it's not terribly difficult to pick up
to the
other games. Like,
Yeah.
there's going to be differences because everybody is like reinterpreting those base mechanics and core concepts to suit their vision. And so, yeah, you still need to read through like the core rule book and get an understanding of what we're going for here. But at the end of the day, you'll start to recognize some terminology like holds and things like that that will just start to feel familiar and help you get into a rhythm of transitioning between games. That being said, there's a whole other conversation about how, some people try to shoehorn their games into that, framework, and it doesn't work. But like that's another conversation for another time, But oh shoot, what was I gonna say? What was I talking
Combat.
Combat, yes.
Combat, yeah.
Yeah. So the other interesting thing about combat is, so how in D&D, right? Because I think we're all D&D girlies here to some degree.
Yeah.
Recovering, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
D&D
is
Girls
fine.
Anonymous.
D&D is fine. And I will say, I'll let you continue in a minute. Like,
Go
there's
ahead.
nothing wrong with crunchy combat. I don't have a personal grudge against it. I don't prefer it. And I certainly don't prefer it when it comes to like turning those games into content. But it is fine as a like way to play a game of pretend with your friends to have that as an element.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
So the
continue.
thought that I was going to do that I finally remembered, yay, was that in Monster of the Week, and again, in some Powered by the Apocalypse games by extension, you're not limited to action, bonus action, movement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you've got like 3 ideas, as long as your keeper is cool with it, you can hit on all 3 of those things like in one go. Again, it's very like fluid and loose and allows for, in my opinion, a lot more creativity. Not to say that there's no creativity in D&D. There's absolutely creativity in D&D. I have seen our castmate Durs do some absolutely wild things in D&D. He's a maniac in the best way possible. I could go on a whole tangent about just Durs alone, but I do enjoy that if it's like, hey, I've got 2 things I kind of want to hit on right now. Can we do both of those? It's like, yeah, why not? You don't have to wait to the next round.
Some people are able to like bounce around within the confines of like you say, like the parameters, right, of a thing, and really like end up with crazy outcomes. And other people benefit more from like you say, a more loose, just sort of like whatever you can imagine sort of scenario. Yeah, it's like it's more phrasing. for experienced
going on the internet
for experienced role players and people who need less of that outline. I feel like the shift from 5e to powered by the apocalypse systems feels sort of like taking the training wheels off a little bit, because there's not as much there saying like, well, this is how you simulate physics. It's like, we all know how physics is simulated in make-believe pretend stories about heroes and adventures. Like,
Physics
we
and
can
RPGs? What are you talking about?
we
Get
can
outta
not gamify that
that.
aspect. Yeah.
You're like, there's
So
fucking magic out here.
Yeah. Yeah.
right. But there's this like assumed competence on the side
Yeah.
of the GM towards the players and their characters, where like often, like probably more often than I should, I will just let the characters do what they want to do, because it's like there's nothing interesting about making you roll to achieve this thing you're trying to do. That's just, you're like, yeah, your character can do that. We have seen them do things more complicated and like more difficult than that in the past. And there is nothing that me saying like your die result said you couldn't that's going to make this more fun or interesting. So just that happens. Let's get to the next thing where I'm going to say that sounds challenging. Now roll to see how you do.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I was like, because I'm starting to be much more interested, obviously, in exploring new systems, especially having like this podcast and talking to so many new people and getting exposed to so many new systems. I like, how do you, I guess, like how do I phrase this? I'm also now thinking about my phrasing. The Okay, so there's that feeling of reward, right? Whenever you are asked for a check and you make it.
Yeah.
Obviously, versus like that feeling of loss, or, like, oh, you didn't get it this time or whatever. And then you were left kind of wondering like, oh, what did I miss or whatever? How do you dictate that same degree of reward with your players in something that is more narrative and less limiting? Like, I love the sound of that, but I'm wondering like what dictates whether I'm going to give this information freely versus you have to earn this, as a GM.
A lot of it has to do with what I have in mind, right? If I have like a plan for the session, and I plan more like for our game of Monster of the Week than I would for a like home game, again, because we're making it for content. And so there's a lot more like, I need to have some idea of where the story's going or it will not make a good episode. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between like my advice when it comes to like, here's what you should do if you're making an actual play. Here's what you should do if you're just playing at home with your friends. But in general, I think still applying that like narrative first, freer system kind of mentality that like in both cases, when you do ask for those roles, right? The payoff of, succeeding or failing, even if it's a fail forward, is going to feel more impactful because you haven't been asked to roll until this one very specific thing. And again, usually I'm trying to find the thing that will like make those stakes suddenly go, oh, I gotta sit up in my chair. I gotta get a different die because I rolled well on the last one and I want a better chance on the
this
next
guy hates
one.
right. Getting thrown out.
So,
go grab one.
So
God,
the infrequency,
every other episode.
that like, absence makes the heart grow fonder concept of like, the less you do it, when you do end up rolling, ooh, it really matters. And like those results will really feel impactful.
It makes it also important.
Yeah, but that also being said, I would say playing in this kind of game for a long time now, you care or you start to care less about that I did it, I won kind of feeling. It's more of like, oh, my character got to do that thing. That's so cool because it sets up my friend whose character is about to do this other thing. Or even, oh my gosh, I didn't do it. Oh, that's going to be so bad for them. And isn't that delicious?
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about at all, Natalie. I wasn't failing left and right in the zero.
I'm not making big examples for my cast member who's sitting right here at the table.
What are you talking about? I failed so much when we did our like little prelude episode. So we put out this like 2-parter. It was supposed to be a one shot, but we got too lost in the RP sauce and like as one does. And this girl was failing left and right. Granted, she's not really a magic-y person and she was trying to do magic to like cover her ass. But to say I got a lot of 6s and leveled up by the end of that is
oh my god
the simple summaries to explain that how that episode went for me. So it was so much fun though. It caused a lot of problems. We actually like to put silly little nicknames in our Zoom call when we record. So I literally had written myself in as Val, aka the problem. So
I am in fact the drama
theme the entire session.
I love that.
That's so good.
Yeah.
I feel like for us, like, I mean, me and my players, like, we started on D&D. We've been playing D&D. We are still currently on D&D, technically, by the skin of our teeth.
There's a lot of things I like about D&D.
Yeah, we're still using
same.
we're still using the 5e like mechanics and all that, but like it's very homebrew. I've thrown that book out the window. It's fine.
Out of curiosity, did you start with 5e or 3.5e? Because I started with 3.5e.
We both started with 5e.
We both started with 5e. Yeah.
Lucky.
Yeah, I've heard tales and myths and legends of what the ye olde.
I have some nostalgia for 3.5e. It was like my first exposure to D&D, but then as soon as that GM had like moved away and like went back to his home state, the next person who like stepped up to GM was like, nah guys, we're doing 5e because 3.5e I cannot keep up with. And we're like, okay, no problem. And I was like, wow, this is so much easier.
I heard it's a lot of crunch and a lot of numbers, which I'm too gay math. I'm barely making it as it is. So
that's so fair.
Our game itself, like, even though we do stick to like the traditional, it's definitely 100% much more narrative because we're predominantly role playing most of the time. So really the roles that I'm asking for are those like persuasion, insight, perception, like things to see if you notice the reactions or things about the social aspects of the game.
Right.
Or like, charisma, persuasion, all that good stuff. And like we'll get to combat every now and then, but it's still mostly narrative based. So we're not playing too hardcore into the existing mechanics unless we are in those combat scenarios.
Yeah.
And 90% of the time, even when we are in combat, like I'm very much I like it do it for the plot situation. So even if like it's not technically mechanically allowed, if one of y'all has pitched me something that is fucking cool, I will at least give you like the chance to break the rule, and I'll be like, roll me a d20 right now. Let's see if you can do it. And if it goes, and then I'm like, yeah, sure, you fucking do that thing. I don't give a fuck about your action economy. I don't give a fuck what you just did that would say that you can't do this.
Yep.
Because like fuck it, and it's good for the plot.
Yeah.
I personally love like giving things in exchange to like make a thing happen. So Natalie and I actually know each other through a mutual DM. He like started this super big expansive D&D campaign where it's like multiple arcs are taking place in the same world, and at some point everyone's gonna like come together to do like I don't know what, but it's been going on for years. Maybe by Tiamat, I don't know. But that's how Natalie and I originally first met. And, you know, one of my most recent sessions with him, like last year, I was like, hey, Vinny, can I take like 3 exhaustion points to do this thing? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, cool, thank you. Like, you know, I'm like, let me use violence against myself for the plot.
Oh, 100%.
I live for that shit.
Yeah, succeeding at a cost is really, really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I did that in like our Western horror campaign. Because I was like, that one is one that we are like, the combat has me by the fucking throat the entire time. And it's one of the only situations in which I've been so fucking into it. Because he truly is so good at running it and like keeping us at the edge of our fucking seat the whole time. And we are literally like pulling our fucking A game out there. I'm like, that is the only time I've ever been looking at my fucking character sheet and I'm like out here like a war strategist trying to plan that shit.
Love that.
I love that he's brought that out in us. But yeah, there was a point where like I'm out of spell slots. We're still in the shit. And like there was this whole thing he had where there was like a pet cemetery. We're like facing this hag. There was like a pet cemetery and all of the pets have like conglomerated into this like bone golem situation. And it was, as we downed other enemies, it was absorbing them. There was these giant like eldritch deer, huge. And when we downed one, it like absorbed it and it became this massive thing. Horrible minotaur thing. So like all my party members are basically inside except for like Mariah's who had just been down, barely got up. Type deal. And I'm out there and basically by myself facing this giant eldritch minotaur bone thing. No spell slots to my fucking name. And I look at him, I'm like, what? And like I remembered last minute that he was like, if you take exhaustion, I'll let you do a thing. And I was like, hey, if I take exhaustion, can I get my turn undead back? Because I already used it.
Yeah.
And he's like, we'll roll for it. And I think we got, I think he rolled like a big chunk on the table open and we got like a nat 20 and we fucking screamed. We were playing in a game store. So like all
no. Or it's like, what's happening?
What's happening? And all they see is like little Christmas reindeer that he bought at a store.
Michael's or whatever.
Most
But-
horrifying Christmas deer you'll ever
most
come across.
horrifying Christmas deer. But we were so hyped about it. And I was like, I will gladly take this exhaustion. And like, we basically just in that saved our asses because otherwise we would have just been gonzo.
Oh yeah, because it like regained all those hit points after it absorbed something.
Yeah,
it's
so we were like,
we
"Oh,
don't
fuck."
we don't have anything.
That is awful. Thanks, I hate it.
Yes,
Natalie,
wild.
please don't take notes.
Wild combat.
Why do you think I'm so
Yeah.
quiet right now?
Oh my god, Natalie!
Crazy how this notepad appeared in my hand.
Yeah.
Oh no!
Shout out to Teddy for putting us through some of the most ringer combats we've ever been through, but it's so fucking fun. Ugh, I love it. Yeah, no, but like, I don't know. For us, I think I've just now gotten into the swing of like how to run my combats and stuff like that. Because in the beginning, again, am not a numbers girly. I didn't know how to make balance encounters. I was like, this shit feels too easy, but I also don't want to go too ham and just kill everybody.
Yeah.
So like, what the fuck do I do?
Your stride in like my arc finale.
Yeah.
That was really good combat. And it could have gone a lot of different ways and it was still very fluid and
it still had narrative stuff in it.
Yeah.
Cause like y'all still, I love having a combat and somehow mid combat, you like talk your way out of it. You know, like roll
my God,
an
yeah.
intimidation, roll a persuasion, whatever.
yeah.
My favorite thing in like combat is when you can make those moments to be like dramatic on main and like dive in front of somebody to protect them and stuff like that and just be like very, very dramatic and very tragic.
Oh yeah, I'm a whore for the trauma.
Yeah. And there's like literally a move in Monster of the Week that's called Protect Somebody. And I'm just like, yes,
Oh,
I want
love
to use this. I haven't used it yet, but I really want to.
I love that.
I just want
Yeah,
to be
no.
dramatic.
I'm a big sacrificial lamb girly. I'm like,
Yes.
no, that's applicable both in life and in fantasy.
Yep. Love to see it.
Oh, I love that. So for yours, like how do you kind of tackle adding that element of like this is a air quotes real world setting with the fantasy like elements kind of tied in there, or the supernatural elements rather, with Monster of the Week?
Mel, do you want to go first?
I think you should go first.
Monster of the Week appeals to me because it hits a very like specific genre that I really enjoy. I don't know why, but like I find, the like almost like tongue-in-cheek nature of taking like fairy tales and fantasy and being like, yeah, dwarves, actually, it's this guy at the newspaper stand. Isn't that cute? Like, but kind of cool if you think about it in like a broader sense. Like dwarves could be anywhere. Like, and same with literally every other fantasy trope or character or creature, right? Like the idea of them having been around for the stories of, high fantasy in the past, but having adapted and figured out their place in the world as it has like grown and moved forward along with humanity's, advancement with technology and cities and society and stuff. Just really like, I don't know. I love that. I think that's great. I think it is a way to show like that, as much as like humanity has impacted the world, like there are certain things about it that are never going to change and will be around like way longer than any person, right? And so like I try to evoke that feeling when it comes to my fantasy and like the characters that I populate our world with, of like, they were around and then they like saw y'all doing this and they were like, okay, for now it's this thing, but like it might change again. And what's that going to look like? And so for me, I think I pull a lot on just that like personal love and appreciation for like natural spaces. And I do a lot of like animal stuff for like, I think like this, like the, core representative spirit of like certain animals are like important aspects to storytelling, and like extending that even into like mythical creatures like dragons and, sea serpents and other things. And also because we are Monster of the Week, into like cryptids and like, what if Sasquatches are like a whole society that are just like kind of like, okay, we'll just keep it on the down low that we're here. Like,
We're just really quiet, introverted people, and we just braid each other's hair in peace.
They just
gotta live in the woods because we like log cabins. Like, know.
What if Mothman was actually Moth Madam and like super hot and had a very successful business? Yeah, Moth Mommy.
As we should.
We do have that in our show, by the way.
We have Mothman on our show. She's great.
I love her a lot.
I love Mommy. That's so cute.
Yeah. So like
But also
that,
our show. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead, finish it.
I was just gonna say our show totally doesn't have any environmentalist themes whatsoever. What are you talking about?
We do a lot of environmental
None.
threats and problems.
What?
Because again, it's I like the idea of, the quote unquote monsters being mostly friendly. And so like we do have antagonists and creatures and problems in the world that are just like, yep, no, they're downright evil and bad. But I include a lot of, what I guess you could call source material as like allies and friends to the characters. And so then you have to say, well, all right, if Mothman and Sasquatch and the like if those are all pretty like net neutral characters that aren't gonna like be causing the problem, what are the things that are causing the problem? And then you start looking into way more obscure cryptids and creatures, and you start to think less in terms of
Folklore
like,
stuff.
yeah, like what monster is it going to be? And it's more like, what person is causing a problem for a monster and our heroes have to go and help the monster instead?
Yeah.
Or two monsters are having a fight and they got to mediate and no one's really wrong, but there's a conflict going on, right? Like, and sort of evolving the, I guess, very like basic story structure of like monster equals problem to like problem, monsters are around, now what? And I don't know, I've figured out this formula, I guess, in terms of how my brain comes up with stories and imagines when I get to just like sit and play as a world, writer, creator, and just say like, okay, I'm going to pick this like really interesting national park, or I'm going to find this like cool geographic feature somewhere within like the bounds of our story and say, what's going on there? What could be the problem? Come up with a bunch of things, see what fits, see what doesn't, and then just fill out the cast of characters that are existing in that spot while this issue is happening, and then say, okay, heroes, go see what you add to the mix there and see what you would either add helpfully or in, a less helpful way, depending on
Or cause chaos.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Causing chaos. Don't know anything about that. What?
I would never. Never.
That's my thing. I find the world we live in, despite the many problems it has, still beautiful and, containing these almost magical places still somehow. And that like resilience is really cool. And I like to bring that out in our theming.
Awesome.
I love
Yeah.
that.
I very much love to play on. I've done this a lot, like in our home game where, and I talked about this before, where when it comes to like building out villains and finding their motivations or like who are going to be the antagonists in these scenarios, I like to play in a very big realm of gray in that villains are villains depending on the side of the coin that you're on and the interactions that you have with them. And so there's people that are very friendly to the players that are for sure not super kosher people.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm currently running an OSRP scene with a friend of ours, Oak. He's running his character who is like an uncle to my character, but he's also torturing a woman for information.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Because
So
he is like a downright criminal.
yeah, he's a whole ass
Dang.
criminal that like works. He's like an Eldridge mafia boss. And so
But to your character, you're like, that's uncle.
yeah.
Oh my god.
You're like, that's her like surrogate parent at this point.
Yeah. And then like what I did with Mariah's arc is like I very much red herringed everybody in the beginning because they're in the college that she was in, the Witherbloom College, which was very much like the nature. It's like a whole college that's like in a forest basically. And so everything is like built in that nature. There's two deans, and then there's the dean of growth, Lisette, and then there's the dean of decay, which I reskinned him because I think in Strixhaven it's the dean of the vein and he was a vampire.
Yeah.
And I was like, nah.
Like I can do better.
Yeah, I can do that. And so I made him the Dean of Decay, and he is very much my lore behind him is that he is like, well, actually I can't say that because you're right here. Never mind. Spoiler. But what she does know is
That's
that he
so
is
alarming that apparently there's more. Cool.
But he is an amalgamation of all of the things that have killed him in the past. So when something kills him, he revives by absorbing them. And so he looks like a monster. He has a dead deer skull for a face, and he's got like 4 arms and wings and tails and talons and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And when he's a druid, and when he wild shapes, it is like a very eldritchy version.
Oh, is he a druid?
He is a druid. You haven't seen him wild shape. It's terrifying.
Was that what he did at the final fight? Was that not wild shaping?
No, that's just his monster form.
Okay, cool.
Good
for him.
I'm seeing a lot of absorption themes in your gaming experience. There's something to unpack here.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
Now that character is also like a scary uncle. My character just collected scary dog privilege.
Scary dog privilege for sure.
Incredible.
But it was very much like the clear, the stereotypical line of thought was towards him, especially in regards to what was going on with her character, because she's a reborn and there's like all this stuff about necromancy and whatever.
Yep.
So it was very clear, like, it's got to be this guy, versus it was actually Lisette, who is like, the world's most powerful healer. And she has this outward appearance of being very caring and doting and light and all of these things. But then lo and behold, she's got like all this underground bullshit going on.
Running a full like necromancy lab, killing untold numbers of people to try to resurrect them, because she was trying to be able, like, her
skirt around the limitations of true resurrection.
Her lover had died, and her lover was my Anya's a vengeance paladin to a death god that we homebrewed. And she's the champion of that death god, but the death god's previous champion
was her lover.
Was Lisette's lover. And it was a thing of like, he did not want to come back. He's like, fully let me go and let me
nor is he able to, because
live
his
in
god
the land with my god, and the god and his god's like, even if you wanted to go back, you're not fucking going back, because once you cross over the mortal coil, your soul belongs to me. So the insult of like
Lisette being the most powerful healer and like resurrector, and couldn't bring her lover back.
And then he allowed like McCall, her Anya's god, and Lorcan, Lisette's lover's god.
We love a villain with attachment issues.
Yes. Again, don't know anything about that. I don't know what you're talking about. We totally don't deal with this in our latest arc.
But I loved that element of it, and like, I just have a soft spot for monsters, as we know. And I was like, it was so fun to watch. I'll be like, yo, that man is creepy as fuck. And I'm like, that's baby girl.
It is baby girl. Yeah.
We love a switcheroo.
Like, we love him dearly. There was a very, very cute scene. It was deeply traumatic, but in retrospect, very cute, where like what the amalgamation of what Lisette had turned Anya's parents into, because they were all kidnapped. And like, while Anya was killed and resurrected, her parents weren't. They were killed, and then like sewn together into a weird.
I went full out Metal Alchemy.
Oh, it was rough.
Dang.
And so there was like a moment where that creature came into that final fight, and then like Anya's god used Valentine as sort of like a vessel to project himself onto, to like help her up after her fucking what was left of her homunculus parents waddled in. And
waddled in is that
not waddled?
Waddled's not inaccurate, which is horrifying. Yeah, and there was like a very sweet moment of Valentine being like, I can help you end this quickly, because he's like, I'd be having all the arms. So it's like,
yeah, I got all the arms, all the teeth.
Yeah, he's like, no one fucking touch me, because if you touch me, I will absorb you if you do any harm to me.
Yeah. So everyone back the fuck up. Let me do this thing.
There was like a moment of comic relief in that fight, like when, because like Valentine was being kind of his energy like sucked into like a corpse flower, because Lisette was going to use basically his life force to do more fuck shit. And so after we freed Valentine, Ollie gave like our other players who like weren't right there by him like a round to basically get the fuck out of the way, where he was just like, fucking move.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is a big monstrous Dean, and they're like, cool, you have a movement and a dash to get out of his way. To not be where he is going.
Yeah. And like the one character that was like right in front of this monster at the doorway was like, say fucking less, and like just yeeted them.
You get a free dash and disengage.
I've been out here screaming with this thing on top of me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But like, I love playing in those areas of like, I don't know. I've just always had a soft spot for monsters, and like having the unsuspecting person be the villain, and like realizing their motivations and all of that.
Well, and I've like playing around with that with Anya as well, like her seeing herself as a monster, less alive or less human because of what she is now, and trying to come to terms with that. And she had lost her memories and had to reclaim them. Like, it's just, there's a lot around like what makes us human and what caused you to lose your humanity, and the different ways that can show up is very fun.
Yeah.
And something that I like playing around with a lot.
Yeah.
Dang.
We be out here on the trauma.
Stories. There's a reason I
fully
trauma stories.
Vampire the Masquerade.
Yeah.
In your guys' like vampire games, I know you're saying you're like avoiding the Inquisition and that sort of thing. Do you find yourselves looking to avoid like real world like topics where like no one has come up with an answer yet?
No, not so much. Of like, I think for me, so like the Fall of London book comes with sort of a set adventure of like how like there's certain you should have your players play these characters who slot really nicely into the plot, and then
we said nah.
And I didn't do that at all, and then realized I was gonna have to fucking tie this plot together on something. And so I think for me, I am more interested in the stories that have come out that each of my players have put on the table, and then also the political maneuvering between like the current Prince of London and the kindred that was the past Prince of London, who is trying to reclaim that seat of power that was stolen from him. And like, I'm more interested in that conflict and seeing where the characters choose to cast their lot, because like I was very clear, I said it in the intro of the first game we played, of like, there are no good guys in this. You were all monsters. You hurt people
to stay alive,
mortals to live and to sustain yourself. You are not good. What you do with what vestiges remain of your humanity, that's up to you. But like, do not mistake yourself for a hero, and don't mistake any other kindred as a hero either, especially the older ones, because they've got, as the older they are, when you
the more fucked up shit they've been done.
Yeah, the less reason you have to give a fuck about any and everything. So I'm more interested in seeing that stuff play out. And I think after we've kind of made the round of touching on everybody's arcs, then I will ramp up the Inquisition stuff and add in the human element after I have a better idea of where the kindred are at. If that makes sense. Like, there'll be some smaller combats and stuff where I'll use Inquisition soldiers just because honestly they're going to be easy
just fodder.
But they're it's not the most interesting thing for me right now. So it's letting that play out and then finding a way to make that more interesting, and in what factions get screwed over, and like how do they then leverage the threat of the Inquisition to try to gain back power they've lost, like stuff like that. But I need other things to play out and see like what chess pieces are still on the board and who gets taken out. And
my character's here to kill men and fuck women.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's
a whole mood. Honestly.
A big ass Viking woman, and she's like, I hate men, but damn women.
Yeah.
Iconic TBH.
There's one man that Ollie's character might be like, you know what, I could rally.
Yeah, there's a single one. They gotta be kind of effeminate.
And you haven't met him yet. They don't know that he's still alive, technically.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, I see you.
I had this thought when we were talking about Monster of the Week still. Have you or Natalie seen the movie Bright?
Yes.
I have not.
I also haven't.
You haven't?
I don't think so.
Okay. It's not like the plot wise, not the greatest movie.
Give me like a synopsis. Like what's the deal?
The world is literally like in that vein of like, what if we lived in a world where like orcs and elves and like fantasy races existed, and it just all grew modern along with humans.
Yeah.
So like there's like there's some racial elements in there and whatever. But like in the overarching plot, it's like centered around these two cops. And so it's Will Smith and this orc that like, and like in this world, the orc races are known to be the more like problematic, like involved in gang stuff and all that. But this orc decides to become a cop, obviously like faces a bit of adversity in that. And him and Will Smith are partners. And so they start investigating some crimes that are going on, and it very much like leads down a whole path of like, oh, this is bigger than we thought it was.
Yeah.
The plot itself is okay, but the world itself, and like I loved seeing the little details in the back kind of thing. Like the elves are very rich and it's very like modern influencer, like living in high-rise apartments and like driving sports cars.
Which makes sense because they live these unnaturally long lives.
Yeah.
So they have to.
And I remember seeing little things like a centaur cop, like the horse cops.
Hell yeah.
And so like centaur bikers.
Yeah. And I was also love that.
Yeah, all these random things. And I was like, I remember just loving that element of world building of like thinking of like, okay, yeah, what if these races like all came up together in a world more modern like ours? Like, what would that look like?
Okay. Are you ready? Because you have teed me up and I'm about to pop
Get
the
it.
fuck off.
Go, Natalie. Go.
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 So,
Be free.
you kind of touched on it a little bit where like, yes, that like background world building in that movie was very like fun visually and fun to be like, oh, they did that with that type of thing,
Yeah.
right? Right. Or like how he has like the pixie that he like has trouble with on his lawn or something or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh my God.
great. But I will say that completely like sets up this topic that I've been like kind of, I don't want to say like struggling with because I'm like trying to learn and like undo or like unlearn a lot of like my biases growing up as a white person of like, you know, this issue of once you bring any kind of fantasy over to a modern setting, suddenly you're not just dealing with the issue of like, well, you shouldn't make a race of people that's evil. Like that's just bad writing. It's lazy. It's stupid. But like now you have, okay, well, now all the fantasy people are in the modern world and the modern world has all of its modern problems like
Yeah.
racism and, you know, corruption and, you know, the cops being terrible. And so like in your games, how do you explore these themes if that's a thing your players want to do in a way that like incorporates the fantasy element, but also like recognizes, okay, if we're going to touch on this, well, this is going to bring up a lot of like actual issues that like,
Yeah.
you know, are still, you know, people write books about them and no one has figured out like what the actual answer is yet.
Yeah. We don't
People
have
have different answers depending on which side of the, you know, discussion they're landing on, right? We had this come up recently because in our world there is the Eastie Agency, and you know, you can put in parentheses the Men in Black, the BPRD. Like it's just the big government entity of people that deal with supernatural problems, right? Like actual problems. But because it has that like pre-existing trope of like, well, it's a government agency. Well, it's like, okay, well, now that's a government agency with like arrest power on anybody and like full, you know, carte blanche, like go around, flash the badge and say, we're the authority here. You have to listen to us. And that pulls in the whole topic of like all of those government agencies in the real world exist on like a threat system of like,
Yeah.
the FBI shows up in your door and it's like, do what we say. We're the FBI. You do because you're scared of them. You are afraid of them and the police and everything. You know, that's like how that system works. But then you say, okay, well, this is a fantasy world, right? So we want this team of like heroes. This is the good version of that. It's like, does a good version of that fucking exist? I don't know.
Right.
I would like it to, because there is the idea of like you have supernatural crime and nobody wants crime, but like how do you deal with crime when that is the only thing we've come up with so far to like deter, right? Is another armed gang. They're just another gang. So it's like,
There's
So
also
anyway,
like
this is just me like, you've hit a nerve where I'm like, I've been literally trying to figure this out.
Yeah, we had a whole big discussion about it, like after a specific episode.
Yeah.
I what was it? I made a joke or whatever about like,
well, no, I specifically wanted to touch on it a little bit. I had two characters, NPCs from the agency show up and start like questioning another NPC just because they kind of matched a description, right? Which is like shitty profiling. But like people had asked for like, we want to see what the agency is doing right and what the agency is doing wrong. And I'm like, well, there are people in the agency who don't like certain other groups in the city. And they're going to be kind of shitty to those people. Here's what that looks like, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but there, you know, it leaves the idea of like, all right, well, but the heroes are part of this system and, you know, all cops are bastards. Like, what does that mean for the heroes who have like decided to be part of this, you know, Avengers, X-Men style group of government agents? Like, you know, at that point, you can put any hero group in, you know, most comics and be like, well, they're also operating on like a threat, you know, deterrent system too. Like, what do you do? You know?
It's just another version of it.
It's just a different superpowered version where like suddenly instead of being afraid, you're afraid of them, but also you like treat them like a god, you know?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
also, like, for example, like, I mean, in our own society, like in things like comics or even modern fantasy and other things, like, you're the heroes and you're kind of in almost all situations taking justice into your own hands.
yeah.
And we live in a world where we cannot do that.
No.
Like there are laws in place, there are rules in place, and I cannot just go up and like execute my own interpretation of the law.
No.
In a certain given situation.
and like probably shouldn't, right? Like the whole bit from
Arguably, that's a good rule.
D20 is coming out with Fantasy High and like their third season of that. A big concept in that show is how like adventurers are violent hooligans. Like it's become such a trope. So it's like, okay. And in our world,
like
especially
how does the
too,
society deal with that?
yeah, like in our world, magic just became public. Right?
Yeah.
For season 3, like magic's out. The supernatural world is not a secret anymore. And so as like a story device, it was like, well, if I don't have some of the characters join the agency, how are they going around causing a bunch of collateral damage and fighting crime bosses without
And
then
not
just being
getting
arrested
incarcerated
themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like, okay, well then what do you do? Like
Yeah. Are we now domestic terrorists technically?
Oh my
whatever,
God.
label you want to throw at it, but it's like there needs to be some kind of like framework that allows the heroes to be the heroes, or the story becomes about how they really shouldn't be allowed to do what they do, or the system should allow it, but the system also should be doing their job instead. Like, again, it brings up this whole thing of like, well, if you don't want crime, how do you stop crime without, someone whose
Without
job
doing the
is
crime.
to go out and stop it, right?
Yeah.
And the answer to that is probably like end capitalism, and like, support community.
Brilliantly break the system, eat the
But
rich.
barring that, because that's impossible, apparently, government.
Yeah,
But
so
like,
you get
you
so
know what I mean?
philosophical immediately,
It
and then
becomes
it's like,
treating a
okay,
symptom rather than like actually solving the problem, which would be like a utopian,
Mm.
society where everyone's
Yeah,
basic
with, like
needs are met and taken care of. So like,
Right.
yeah,
ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky. It like,
It-
especially as someone like creating this sort of story for content where it's like, if we say a thing or I take like too hard a
Yeah.
stance in like one direction or the other, it's like, oh, they have a bad
It's
opinion. about this.
polarizing.
yeah.
Bye. It's
When
like,
it
well,
says
I'm
something
sorry.
about, like,
Did you
the
have
real
a
world.
solution for the police state in the real world? And now
Yeah.
make it magical and solve that problem? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think things like that is why it is important to have those conversations of like, what do we want to touch on?
Yeah.
It's definitely in things like with Vampire the Masquerade, it's like there are certain things where I've talked about it a ton on here, but there's a very good little disclaimer in the book where it's like there's a lot of horror in the world, in the real world we live in, and we don't have to drag that into our fantasy
Mhm.
world as well. Like there are a lot of things like I love thinking about like the inherent corrupting influence of power
Mhm.
and how that blends with immortality. And like when you have existed with absolute control for millennia,
Yeah.
what that does to a psyche. And I think like stuff like that is really interesting. But you have to figure out like, okay, clearly up to what point are we willing to explore this? And
Yeah.
then where are we like, what are we comfortable getting into?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. For sure.
And for me, like I have a specific game where I'm like, I don't want to rely on the isms as a crutch to make
No,
someone
yeah.
bad enough to hate. I feel like
Mhm.
there's
Yeah.
plenty of things to work with that are much more creative and much
Yeah.
more interesting to make a villain. But then also to your point, like there's certain things that I'm like, if they're like sometimes we come to a table and like there's an inherent level of like I'm working through a thing through this character and I'm now realizing that I've like put a little bit too much of that in there,
Yep.
but now we're here.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're fighting a representation of our demons at that table, and it's nice to get to defeat it, and like it's rewarding in that sense. So it's like I think if you've had that conversation with your players, and they know that you are using that as a device to portray someone as a bad guy that is like a representation of this real life struggle that they
Mhm.
want to overcome or conquer. And that there's an understanding there amongst you and your players that that's an element that you want to explore in that game. Sure. But then like you said, you have an element that's different in the sense of like you are producing this for entertainment and that's out there. And as we all know, especially as creators, when you start kind of stepping into those trickier subjects and more polarizing subjects, especially even in fantasy, it's hard. It gets sticky
really
because it's like, yes, your players have agreed to it, but then your audience may have a different perspective or have a different reaction to
And
certain
everyone
things.
goes over it with a fine-tooth comb too,
Yeah.
Like what the situation I described was like a very minor scene that like kind of only tied into the story as a like device to get another character who'd been like away from the other heroes, like back into the team like situation, right? And so it's a thing of like even stuff in the background of your world is making statements these days. And I don't know, I think there's this like growing worrisome trend of like entertainers at any level. You know what I mean? Like we are still a kind of small podcast. Like we have made some cool friends and are like making cool stuff, but it's very much still like I don't know that our little story about gays fighting and befriending monsters is like the place for us to like solve that issue for society,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything I say is going to be not only influenced by like my own biases and privilege and things like
experiences,
that and
yeah.
experiences, but also like I am a person who excels at taking cryptids and making them friends in a story. I am not a political scientist, and I don't
Yeah,
have
no.
experience in that field. Like, I don't understand even really all the different intricacies and like ways that like changing one thing about it affects a million other interconnected issues and, people's lives. But it's this pressure that exists, I think, especially in tabletop space, especially in recent tabletop space, because the like wave of, new players coming in the last 10 years or so who want to diversify and add representation and make all these like positive changes to the hobby, but are now also projecting like their expectations or their wishes on the people making content in the space and saying like, if you don't align perfectly or don't like fully represent my like very particular views on every topic, then like
Yeah.
I'm going to vilify you and say that you're like quote unquote not doing enough.
Yeah.
Right. Like everyone likes to point the comparison and say like Critical Role is not diverse enough and D20 is way better for doing that. It's like Critical Role never thought they were going to be who they were. You know what I
No.
mean? And like it's not really on them for that being the case. And I think they're doing a good job of like addressing that concern. But I
Yeah.
also
Where they
sort of
can.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I also sort of feel like not like upset, but a little like indignant on their behalf of like, are you demanding that they stop like playing together? That's their whole thing. Like, I don't know. It's
There's a conversation to be had about where the line is between being like, a production company,
Yeah.
right? Like Critical Role, because they have the manpower to do that versus like a smaller indie podcast that may have been started, as a group of friends, which is again Critical Role's origin story, but they are now a company.
Mm,
It changes when you are a
It changes.
corporation. Like
Yeah.
you
The
have different
expectations eventually
obligations
change.
to when and responsibilities that come with that level of notoriety and money and influence and
Yeah.
and all that does affect things. And like
Yeah.
I
That being
I fully
said,
get
I
that.
love
Of like,
EXU.
oh,
Yeah.
same. Like, and should do they have an obligation to like break up the main cast? No, I don't think so.
No.
But like, and have they made an effort to be better about like bringing on people of different backgrounds? Stuff? Yeah, they have. But
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, there is that it has to be acknowledged. And it's like when you are a corporate entity that is making money from it, yes, there is something dehumanizing about that, but you're also making money from it, right?
mm,
Yeah.
So you can't, it's kind of that like, there are pros and cons to both. Like as you
Yeah.
grow at a certain point, you will be held to different standards.
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's an interesting element too, because it's like we're in an industry too that, and we've touched on this before, that the dynamic at the table is so key and important to good
Mhm.
storytelling. And yes, plenty of people can make more effort to diversify, but like in the case of Critical Role, like they all started as friends in the same voice acting industry and all that stuff, and then it grew into its thing, and they have a dynamic that works.
Yeah.
And to break that up would shift things to a degree that wouldn't be
it would be
entertaining.
awful.
Whereas like the Dimension 20 model, you have different seasons every few months and you change the cast out and they have more room to play
Also,
there.
Dimension 20 also had like the entire bullpen of like the college humor
Yeah.
cast
Yeah.
with which they could select people from. It wasn't quite the same origin story of like just friends streaming a game that happened to go like mega viral.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like everybody, and I think it is like it's a transparency thing. It's a like owning of like, yeah, no, like we are not the most diverse cast, and here's what we're doing to work on that.
Mhm.
And I think if you do that, that's all anyone can really ask. It's like people get upset when people try to get like immediately over defensive or try to explain why it's not a or why they're not doing that. Or
Yeah.
it's like, no, it's like it can be both and like it can be this is actually legit in your group of friends, and that's totally fine. And when you have an opportunity to incorporate a more diverse cast, do it.
Yeah.
And great.
Cool.
It's not one or the other.
Yeah. It is
Yeah.
it is a hard space to navigate, but it's also, like you said,
But
like
that's true of anything, right?
that's true of anything, but you take accountability for what you can and then do the best that you can in another. Like I've had the similar notion of like, yeah, we are also very small, But like I was taking a second to look back at like the list of guests that we've had, and I was like, yeah, a lot of them are predominantly white. And so I was like, I had a conversation with Mariah and I was like, hey, I want to make more of an effort this year to find more creators that like
creators
are
of color
diversified and like
disabled
highlight
people.
that. And so I've been reaching out more and doing more research and making sure I'm intentional about like finding all these good creators that are also like making amazing content, and make sure that I'm being self-aware.
It's a mindfulness.
It's a mindfulness
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And it's like that's the most that I can do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm a Latin woman myself, so I'm like that's important to me to make sure I'm highlighting all the people in the space, not
And it's
just what's more easily available or
Right.
or whatever, or what the algorithm will more readily push out.
At the end of the day, we're just all out here doing like our best, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
And you'll never please everyone.
No.
You never will.
No.
There will always be criticism, and like some of it will be valid and helpful and something to listen to, and some of it won't be. And it's more true if you were like creating things that are going to be consumed by the public, but it is also true if you were just a human bebopping around on this flying rock.
Doing my best.
Yeah. Feedback versus dunking on someone. Two very different vibes.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Be kind to creators if you're listening and are part of the like consumer community, I guess. Like, you know, we're just telling stories and talking about games. And like Mel was saying, we're all doing our best. And there's definitely truth to what you were saying of like, when you get us to a certain point, it comes with more responsibility.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that.
Do we need to drop a Spider-Man quote?
No, more like
it's teed up.
The point I'm getting at is like the responsibility is there, and like being open to critique is important. But I think also on the other side of that coin is like there is not what do I say? Like it is not an invitation to like entitlement or like you know, what's the other word I want here?
Or like
there's a difference between holding someone legitimately accountable for like exclusionist behavior.
Right.
Yeah. Raising a concern. Yeah. And then, just feeling like you have free reign to attack someone because, they have a platform and all these people that love them. So they probably won't even see it. It's
because
like, again, people on the internet.
This being the like, this being the personality based space that it like is evolving into, like, you can point at like Critical Role, the framework, or D20, the framework, and be like, they are doing XYZ. But then people, because the show is so like hinged upon in terms of its fan base around that like
that core cast,
that connection to the cast members, then they start directing that at like the individuals. And I'm like, these people are just doing their job. And yes, paying them a paycheck. And yes, their corporation has to like make these adjustments and, you know, promote diversity and lift up smaller creators. But like, don't send people DMs about that. Don't demand that someone make a statement about a thing anytime a news story drops just because like you see them as this like figure that you look to for that kind of a thing. Like,
there are times that I will be like looking through comment sections of some other creators that like we're friends with and stuff. And I'm like, how do people even have the time to do this?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, like, hot take, I don't need everyone I follow to have a public opinion on everything all the time. Just like people that follow me don't need to hear my public opinion on everything all the time. Like, there are times to take a stand and to have a public opinion.
Yeah.
It's not every time someone acts a fucking fool on this earth, which is like
sometimes
every single day.
Sometimes it's your role to just listen, boost what they're saying, and just be like, I'm here and I support you, whether I like make a statement about that or if I just reshare like what you put out into the world, because like
fully. Yeah.
Like you can use your platform to boost other voices, and then there's no shame in being like, hey, I am not the person to speak on this topic. Fully recognize my own privilege and my own standing or my own experiences, but I will help uplift the voices that need to be heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like, don't look to me to be an information source on this matter, especially if I'm not the person that should be speaking on it.
Again, we are all out here doing our best. We are trying to support each other.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah. There's a lot of weird, like, social and psychological things where we inherently, I think, just look at people who have like a big following as, they must have an inherent expertise or inherent awareness that we do not.
And it's like, not
and oftentimes, like, no, they don't. And so,
especially if those homies went viral a few months ago.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh my god.
You're like, that was a normal human bee bopping around, and suddenly they got like
they're
a
probably
million
also
followers.
just 2 to
48 hours, their life changed. Yeah.
doing their best. And so it's like, again, I mean, and this is I will not get on a big,
Soapbox.
Yeah, we're
academic.
kind of already there. You're fine.
I won't get on my whole ass academia soapbox right now. But like, I fully lost my train of thought.
And there it goes. And there goes the
Oh.
soapbox.
That was probably
the soapbox broke underneath you.
That was probably
Collapse.
that was probably a sign.
Oh my god.
Because I was like, this is nearing lecture territory, and I don't have that dog in me right now.
Yeah, that's
Right.
so fair.
Oh my goodness. Well, the time flew by, to be real.
Oh my God,
But
dang.
we are for sure coming up on the end here. But you guys, thank you so much for coming on. This was amazing.
Thank
Yeah.
you for having us. Oh my god.
Absolutely. If you ever need guest spots for Monster of the Week, you want me to play a cryptid,
Completely.
I'm here. Hello.
We would love to meet the moth madam.
Oh,
Oh.
yeah.
Hey,
Madam
Natalie.
Moth.
Madam
Yeah.
Moth. Incredible.
What were you saying, Mel?
I was saying there's an idea.
Yeah. Moth Madam family reunion.
Yes.
Hell
Yes, I
yeah.
think so.
Hell yeah. Well, give the listeners just one more time who you are, where they can find you, also any exciting projects and releases and things you got going on coming up.
Oh God, Mel, you go first. I want to.
Oh God, why am I going first?
I want to close. I open.
Fine.
You
All right.
start us here.
All
Now I've
right.
got a radio
If that's
voice.
how it's gonna be,
Gotta
that's how
finish
it's gonna
hard,
be.
yes.
She just Uno reversed me. My God. Okay. Once again, friends, hi. I'm Mel. I go by Melowette on most socials. I play Ariel Valentine on the Storyteller Squad. You can find us at Story Squad Cast. I had another thing I wanted to say after that, and I completely lost it. So
You're good. Beautiful.
Tune into our 3rd season, which is releasing very, very soon. We were just dropping a bunch of art, and at the very minimum, you should go follow our artist, Emery. I believe his handle is Emery _KJR, or is it Emery KJ _art? Yeah.
We should have
Emery KJ _art. I got
show
it.
notes.
I got it. Please follow Emery. He deserves the world. He's a very, very skilled artist, and we love him very, very much. And that's all I got for you for now. Natalie, it's your turn.
All right, adventurers. We've had a really lovely time talking with the folks at Table Talk today. I hope you've enjoyed our little expose, tutorial, short class on Monster of the Week. And world building in the real world, and some of the themes and discussions that can elicit from you and your players, because again, it's a whole different beast than, fantasy adventuring in places like the Forgotten Realms and every other elven made up word for a continent. But if you enjoyed this discussion and you think our stories about queer friendships and friendly cryptids with high adventure sounds like fun, you can find us on the Storyteller Squad. We are at Story Squad Cast across all the major platforms. We are wherever you listen to podcasts. And it's been very nice to talk to you all. So
Thank you.
we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much for listening. And yeah, we will see you all next time. Bye.
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 Table Talk is a podcast brought to you by Mythos Media Productions, bringing you a new episode every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcast. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Table Talk RPG, or check us out at our website, mythosmediaproductions.godaddysite.com. All business inquiries can reach out to us via email at info@mythosmediaproductions.com.